it occurs to me that the 1 Corinthians 13 reading, love is patient, love is kind, it's not puffed up and so forth, it says the consequence, the effect, that which happens when you're in love, but it doesn't actually describe what love is, only the outcome as regards your behavior. But it's a state of being that just, I was going to say, loves the person that you love. And what we mean by that is you just feel wonderful to think of them. They are your perfect company. They are your complete satisfaction, your zenith of bliss and joy and peace. And you're filled with all hope. In short, it seems that love is, and I think it is, not just seems, love is the full embrace, the full presence of, the awareness of all that you truly value. So of course you are then patient and kind and loving yourself and full of hope and happiness and joy. I'm probably repeating myself here, but do you see it's that yes, that is the consequence. But I'm not, let me risk saying something wrong for a moment. I'm not having to do or conscious of or practicing being kind, being patient, not being puffed up and so on and so forth, self-centered. It's not that I'm practicing these things as if they were something that needs to be done to be in love. I am in love. And therefore the consequence is these activities. Why would I do anything else? Do you see what I mean? Whereas so much spirituality is, well, I should be thoughtful of others. How do I practice this? How do I keep mindful of this? I should not get angry. That's another point, isn't it? How do I practice avoiding getting angry? How do I stop myself? How do I where's really all these consequences of love are consequences. I'm not at all sure as they're the cause of loving. It's not that I have to practice these things on all these fronts and I then become a loving person. I might appear to be, in that I'm sending out all the right evidence and messages. But that doesn't mean to say, and I'm not certain as I'm right here, that I have love. Well, unless I truly manage it continuously and freely. And perhaps I could. simply be doing rather than being. And perhaps doing such makes me being after a while. But if you come back to the person who falls in love, he sees someone and he sees something nice about them, by which he means that this other person is an embodiment of some of the things he likes. Perhaps she's just good looking, or he or she is just good looking. Perhaps you realise they've got a very good nature. They care for and seem sensitive and are helpful. And you start to ascribe to them loveliness, all the things you value, not just the things you see, but you start to become very hopeful that they have all the qualities that you value, or many of them, or outstandingly some of them. And you therefore find this person's company, or you anticipate. You haven't necessarily had too much of their company yet. You haven't had much company with them. But, your heart takes a leap when they're around. Oh, something lovely is happening. I've got their company again. They've called to see me, or they're talking to me, they're looking at me and listening to me, or they're chatting away to me, telling me about something, and I'm entranced. By which I mean I'm attributing to them much, much goodness, much loveliness, much acceptability to me. I'm falling in love. And the more I love, the more I start to show those qualities listed in 1 Corinthians 13, patience, loving kindness, goodness. I want to be open and honest, and I so want to care for and be with and appreciate and support and encourage and bring hope and peace and life, and have the benefit of this, have this person flourish. I want to be such a blessing to them. So, for instance, when I say, and this is a major instance, that God is the personification of all that you value, do you see, when you personify what you value, you are automatically giving you this state of being in which, yes, you are patient and kind, loving, giving, encouraging, supporting, because you're seeing them, your projection of them. I've got a feeling they use the word avatar like this, but your view, you're building an avatar of them that you're devoted to. And of course, like the parents of the person you're falling in love with might not see their child as anything like as wonderful as you're seeing them. Or they're extremely happy because you're obviously appreciating some of the things that they appreciate in their child. But do you see, your view of the person may not be, of course, what the person truly is. And the sadness of marriage can be that after a few years, certain things you've attributed or just assumed or didn't expect are found to be about this person, and they're no longer the wonderful person you're in love with. And that is such a shame. But you may have experienced, of course, such love in the earlier times that you are faithful and true. And of course this might be most important for the upbringing of the children that you now have between you. And it may be most important to you too anyway, because both of you, because such loyalty gives good behaviour that benefits each other. So you're blessed by a loyalty, an integrity that you have yourself as a character, encouraged or even born of the lovely experience you've had in loving them, in being in love. And perhaps your loyalty and integrity allows you to continue to feed on that love, where otherwise you would not. In other words, love becomes itself, hopefully and ideally, self-fulfilling. You project this, if I summarize it again, you project this persona to or of or on or about the person that you fall in love with. And that's what falling in love with means, in fact, I think. You hold a view of them that is wonderful, lovely, beautiful. And you're so lifted by such that your habits, your character, your desire in life, your experience of this gives you a desire to be and to value things that perhaps you didn't value before you fell in love. So falling in love is far from being childish. It's an incredibly maturing process. And what we're saying, spiritually speaking, is that you can do this on a mega basis, a macro, in the most magnificent, major way, by doing such with God. Project upon your view of God all that you truly value and love, that you fall in love with, are quickened by so doing. This is the consequence of understanding and valuing the principle of loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. That you're flying, you have this wonderful, magnificent friend as you are seeing God. Now, God is not actually, assuming God exists at all, God is not actually this perfect person, because your view of the perfect is anything but perfect in some ways. It might be one of these gods that takes revenge on its enemies, and it might be one of these gods that's going to make you all powerful or all rich or all, drop dead beautiful. And these things that you're valuing may not be that which gives eternal, harmonious, beautiful life. But you don't know that yet. But you're in love. You're in love with a projection of God in your mind, an avatar that is your ideal. To the Jewish people, or the ancient Hebrew people, that ideal was a magnificent leader, an elder and person like Moses. They were, in the story in some sense, giving all credence to him, albeit as a mouthpiece of God, but he's being seen as perfect and so on in some sense for them. someone who would bring revenge on their enemies. And in that sense, you see, even the murder that he did, where he kills the Egyptian that's ill-treating a fellow Hebrew, one of his culture, is to say, look, I am your ideal. I even kill to protect you and care for you, which is what they valued, of course. They needed to, in the story. I'm not sure if it's a reality. It's not so much a history, it's a historicity, isn't it? Written to validate the existence of this tiny buffer state called, what's it called, Israel, yeah, it is, isn't it? The Hebrew nation. Now what we're hoping is the case is that being in love with this view that you have of God will bring you such encouragement, joy, and peace, and happiness, and hope, love, and generosity, or whatever it brings you that you value, such a lot of it, that it will encourage you in the right direction. Let me go down an avenue of thought here, just in case it's right, and I think it might be. You could have such values at the start that your view of God is a hopeless mismatch to the true God that would bring eternal peace, love, joy, and life eternal. You may, if I stay with the understanding that the Hebrew view is a mismatch, you may worship a God that will euthanize the whole world in order to achieve that which is wonderful as you understand it. So he's selecting only 8 people, Noah and his immediate kids and so on, and wife. It's amazing that these kids don't seem to have kids as well. How is it there's only 8? I mean, you see, we're not talking about a history, are we? We're talking about a historicity, a myth, etc. Okay. So you could, for 2,000 years, be your culture supporting a view that euthanizing your enemy is possibly ultimately the only solution, and God does it with the whole world from time to time, either initially, with the flood, and or later with the Great Judgment, where, a third of the planet dies, and goodness knows what else. Do you see, you're not necessarily steering in the right direction. Well, God comes to the rescue, ideally, we hope and trust. How does he do this? Well, if you really can't hear other people's messages, you just believe in the Old Testament God, then you have to find out the hard way. You can't see it when you're confronted with something that's different to such. You just think it's wrong because it's not Old Testament scripture, scripturally consistent. And I mean, the story of Israel, and just a glance at the 20th century says how much unhappiness they might go through. And has it resulted in a Christian Israel? No. Has it resulted in a secular Israel? Yes. There's a few remnants of the original Hebraic Judaic religion, but Israel is largely a secular state with a cultural heritage that's more and often less adhered to. The man on the street in Israel is not fundamentalist Hebrew or Christian. There are some fundamentalists and there are some fundamental Christians as well, and there are some other faiths, of course, like Islam, which you might see as a sort of branch of the Hebrew fundamentalism. But it's not essentially what Israel is. Israel is a secular fighting state that's defending itself in many ways. It's as worldly as any other state, is what I'm saying. And I'm wanting to mean by that it's some objective fact. I might want it to be Christian, say, but it's not in general. Well, this seems to be bad news from a point of view of the world. No, cultures, nations don't necessarily become more and more religious. Do they become more and more godly? I'm not sure. I think in many ways the whole of the world has become more godly, and in other ways it's still appallingly ungodly. I'm not sure. Although I do understand that the world has to be a mix of good and evil for it to be the classroom that we need to find life eternal. So I am saying that I think whatever the actual total world mix is, it has produced and does produce the opportunity for life eternal that some people manage to break through on at any one time, in any one culture, or religion, or lack of it, and so forth. It achieves what we value, which is that some people are becoming into life eternal. And there's a constant harvest going on. It's an ongoing schooling where people do graduate from all sorts of walks of life. How wonderful. Let me pause. Well, more to the point that's of greatest value here, namely the personal understanding that's going on. And that is that love is the fountain from which all these beautiful spiritual things listed in 1 Corinthians, and there's far more than that too, of course. It's just a good shot at it, if you like. They all spring from love, and that we actually know how to achieve this state of love that will cause such to spring forth in our being, in our life. Because it's there, in a sense. It's to be realized, revealed, and brought to the surface, brought into our consciousness and knowing. Because we are a child of God, which means, if you like, genetically, spiritually speaking, if you can imagine a spiritual geneticism going on, we are children of God. these wonderful values are in us and need to burst into flower, fullness of life, the loveliness of life. And it's done, we know, by simply whatsoever's good and lovely. Think on these things. Because, as I've said so many times, such brings hope, great gratitude, peace and joy, love, loving kindness, whatsoever's good and lovely. Thinking on these things fills us with love. And then all these spiritual things are added unto you. So, seek ye first the kingdom of God, this state of loving, of being, eternally. Devoted to God, well, that means you are utterly purposed on being in harmony with all that you understand God to value. You see, the emphasis in most religions, and certainly the Hebraic ones, is that the emphasis is on obedience, doing, conforming, obeying, keeping commandments. Well, that's an enslavement. Especially if you got some of the principles wrong that you're enslaved to obey. Love is not this. Love is that which comes upon us when we meet what we truly value. And to begin with, ideally, well, not ideally it would be instant and correct, but to the extent that we have some love, we're likely to move in the direction of more. So we start from where you are. You see God as the embodiment, the personification of what you value, and therefore love springs up in you, devotion, joy and peace when you're with such. This experience of joy and peace makes you value such greatly. This you attribute more and more to your God. The right values of hope and joy and peace, loving kindness, faithfulness, wisdom and understanding, devotion. You start to get practice at such and value such all the more because of the goodness they bring in your life. The more you focus on whatsoever is good and lovely in your life, the more you are encouraged to value such, the more you're on your way, aren't you? So the Jesus story goes to the heart of the matter. It simply says, understand your God as Dad. Dad ideally must mean the one that has brought you into existence, protects you, provides for you, loves you, supports a mum that gives all tenderness and care and joy and playfulness and creativity and So you see your God as your heavenly dad. And, well, I wonder if we can't do rather better than that. See him as your perfect parent. You don't need two parents, you just need one parent that meets all your true needs. You might see him as dad or mum, as dearest friend. And in fact, as an adult, we try to find a partner that will do such. The partner is male or female, but it makes no difference to you in a sense, except in the sense that that's what you feel you need and value, and this person fulfills that. As they get older, of course, you find that they're not remaining this young, soft, beautiful woman or powerful, strong, capable man. But they still love and care for you. And that's lovely. And you value them because they've been so good to you, and they still are in their way. Wow. Bless you both. Okay. But if you want life eternal, you can short-circuit the whole thing by loving God in the first place. And you do that by thinking on whatsoever is good and lovely, valuing it, which comes automatically from doing such, and ascribing this to your God, thanking your God for such goodness and loveliness in your life. And you'll find you've found the Jesus way. Understanding God as your Heavenly Father. Fine. Perhaps understanding God as your dearest friend. Fine. Perhaps understanding God as Divine Mother. Fine. Okay. I think all roads lead to Rome in that sense. You'll be drawn to the one that you value the most. Bless you.